Why was everyone silent when she entered the room? It wasn't the kind of silence that followed respect. It wasn't admiration either. It was the kind that carried weight, the kind that said she didn't quite belong there. She walked past rows of uniforms, boots tapping against the floor, her face unreadable. They avoided her eyes. Some smirked. Others shifted in their seats. She didn't flinch. The briefing screen glowed cold light across the room, outlining maps filled with jagged red zones and coordinates only numbers could explain. Commanders spoke in low tones. Markers traced lines across territories no one in that room had ever truly called home. She stood near the edge, back straight, arms folded behind her. No one offered her a chair. That wasn't new. She was used to listening from the margins. The colonel cleared his throat. Phase 1 is insertion, 2 snipers, 2 observers, 1 silent team, clean shots only, no mistakes. His voice had weight. His gaze swept across the room but skipped over her as if she didn't exist. She remembered when his eyes used to linger, years ago, before one mistake stained her name. The screen changed again. A compound appeared, grainy satellite images, black and white, almost ghostly. Inside that compound lived a man no one wanted to acknowledge publicly. His name wasn't spoken. Not yet, but everyone in that room knew his face. They had studied it for weeks. The target wasn't the kind that hid in caves. He hid in plain sight, surrounded by civilians, by family, by the facade of normal life. "Any questions?" the colonel asked. No one spoke. Her silence was louder than all of theirs combined. She could have raised her hand. She could have spoken about the intel gaps. She could have reminded them that the compound sat near a school, near the sound of children's laughter that would turn to screams if the mission went wrong. But she didn't. She never did. They wouldn't have listened anyway. And yet they noticed, even if they pretended not to. Her silence unsettled them. When the room cleared, she lingered for just a moment longer, studying the flicker of the satellite feed as if it could tell her more than they would. A shadow on the corner of the image. A faint movement. Something no one else had caught, or maybe they had and ignored it. She picked up her pack. Outside, night had fallen. The air was heavy, carrying with it the sharp scent of jet fuel and dust. Helicopters pulsed against the darkness like beating hearts. Soldiers laughed in clusters, their voices cutting the stillness. She walked past them, not slowing, not speaking. She had been given the rifle hours before, a weapon too clean, too impersonal. She missed the weight of her own, the one she had carried through more nights than she could count, the one that had kept her breathing when everything else tried to silence her. But that rifle was gone, locked away after the mission that went wrong. The one no one forgave her for. "Hey!" A voice stopped her. She turned. It was Ramirez, her spotter once upon a time. His eyes held the kind of softness soldiers tried to hide, but it slipped through in the way he carried himself. He gave her a small nod. "You sure about this?" he asked. She didn't answer. He smiled faintly. "Still the same. Silent as hell, you know they don't like it, makes M nervous." That much was true. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was survival. Words were wasted when no one listened. Silence gave her power, and sometimes silence gave her truth. Ramirez shifted his pack, glancing at the ground. "I heard about the last time, not from you, from them. I didn't believe it, not all of it anyway." Her jaw tightened. He caught the change in her face and let it go. "Doesn't matter now. What matters is this one. You hit the shot, all of this." He gestured vaguely, as if pointing to invisible ghosts. "It disappears." She wanted to believe him, but ghosts didn't disappear. They lingered. She left without a word. The transport hummed in the distance, engines warming, its lights sharp against the horizon. Inside, metal benches lined the walls. She sat, pack between her feet, rifle leaning against her knee. Across from her sat 2 young soldiers, barely 20, their eyes wide with a mixture of pride and fear. "First time out?" she asked, her voice soft. They nodded, surprised she spoke at all. One of them smiled nervously. Yeah, didn't think I'd get pulled so soon. The other rubbed his hands together. My dad served. He told me it'd be like this. Dust, heat, silence. She studied them quietly. They reminded her of herself years ago, before everything hardened, before silence became her shield. The rotors spun louder, cutting through the night. Dust swirled. The transport lifted, heavy, shuddering against gravity before it climbed into the dark. Inside, the sound was deafening. Conversation turned to gestures, to nods, to glances. She closed her eyes, but not to rest. Memories flickered, the last mission, the one that had broken her name, a hostage, a school, a single second where hesitation had meant everything. She had seen a shadow move where no shadow should have been. She had taken the shot, and in that shot a life was saved, but another was lost. A child, wrong place, wrong time. No one forgave her for that. Not even herself. The helicopter banked. The lights of the compound below came into view, scattered lamps, thin wires, the glow of cigarettes in the hands of men who thought they were safe. She breathed slow, her pulse steady, every sense sharpened. The descent was rough. The ground rushed up, dust exploding around them. Boots hit dirt. Orders whispered, gestures guiding movement. They slipped into the shadows like ghosts. She raised her rifle, eyes through the scope, the world narrowing into one circle of glass and light. The compound walls rose high, barbed wire catching the moon. Shadows shifted inside. She tracked them, 1, 2, 3. And then she saw him. The target. Not through glass, not through images, but real, moving, breathing, laughing. His silhouette framed by the light spilling from a window. Her finger rested against the trigger. But something caught her, a flicker, movement. Not him. A child. Barefoot, carrying something small. A toy, a book, she couldn't tell. Her breath caught in her chest. The compound pulsed with life. The target stood unaware. Soldiers whispered through comms, "Take the shot, confirm target." Her silence stretched. She didn't move. Not yet. Because there was something she hadn't told them. Something buried beneath all their maps and plans. A truth she carried that no one in that room would have wanted to hear. This mission wasn't about the man inside that compound. It was about something, someone else. And she wasn't ready to speak it. Not yet. What made her hesitate? No one asked it out loud, but she could feel the question pressing against her like the weight of a hand on her shoulder. The comms hissed, sharp voices cutting through the static. Sniper 1, confirm visual, confirm target. Her finger still rested on the trigger, her breath steady, but her eye wasn't fixed on the man inside anymore. It lingered on the child, bare feet moving quietly across concrete, a toy clutched in one hand, the absurdity of it, innocence and danger sharing the same space. Sniper 1, do you copy? Her lips didn't move, silence. Then Ramirez's voice, softer, quieter, she copies. He was covering for her. She lowered the rifle just slightly, breaking the sight line. The target kept moving, unaware, shielded by the thin veil of family life around him. Soldiers shifted positions, impatient. A decision needed to be made. But her silence stretched. And in that silence, time slowed. She thought about her brother, the last photograph she had of him, a boy with unruly hair holding up a fishing rod twice his size, smiling as if the world had never known war. He had been 16 when the explosion took him. Wrong place, wrong time, a roadside bomb in a village they were only passing through. The army sent her home in uniform to bury him, then sent her back in uniform to fight the same war that killed him. Wasn't that why she was here? To make sure someone else's brother didn't get blown apart for nothing. Her rifle shook just faintly, not from fear, from memory. Sniper 1, confirm. Her breath came slow, her finger curled but never pressed. Negative, she whispered finally. The channel went quiet. Not silence, stunned quiet, a pause in the chain of command, then a low growl from the colonel himself. Repeat that. She swallowed, negative shot, child in proximity. There was static, then curses. Mission risk is acceptable, take the shot. Her throat tightened. Acceptable, the word carved into her like glass. That was the word they used last time, when the wrong life slipped away, when they left her carrying the stain of it alone. Orders are orders, the voice insisted. But she had already decided. She exhaled, slow and steady, and pulled her rifle back from the sight. Negative. The silence after that felt different, heavy, dangerous. Ramirez didn't say anything, but she felt him shift beside her, felt the weight of his gaze. He didn't agree. He didn't disagree. He just stayed there like he always had, quietly holding the line with her even when it made no sense. The compound stirred. Men walked across the courtyard. Voices rose in a language she only half understood. The child disappeared inside, toy dragging along the ground. Her chance was gone. Abort position, the colonel ordered finally, voice clipped furious. Team 2, prepare for contingency. Her earpiece hissed, then went dead. Command had cut her channel. Ramirez muttered under his breath. Hell just froze. She packed her rifle, hands steady despite the storm brewing in her chest. Her silence wasn't just defiance anymore. It was a wall, a line she had drawn. They moved back through the shadows, retreating toward the extraction zone. Every step felt heavier. She knew what was waiting for her. Reports, accusations, the cold stares of men who never had to carry the weight of children in their scopes. When they reached the ridge, she crouched low, watching the compound from a distance. Lights flickered inside. Laughter spilled into the night. The target remained alive, untouched, safe for now. Do you think you did the right thing? Ramirez asked finally. She didn't answer. Because if you don't, they'll eat you alive. She glanced at him, his face half shadow, half moonlight, the only one who ever dared to speak to her like that. You could have taken it, he said softly, and maybe that child would have grown up in a world without him. Her jaw tightened, or maybe I'd have killed 2 ghosts in one shot. He blinked, studying her. Then he nodded once as if that was enough. The extraction bird came low, blades tearing the night. Dust swallowed them whole as they climbed inside. The 2 young soldiers sat across from her again, but this time their eyes were different. Wide, confused. They had seen her hesitate. They had felt the ripple it caused. One leaned forward. Why didn't you? Ramirez cut him off with a glare. The boy shrank back, words swallowed by fear. But she heard them anyway. Why didn't you? The ride back was long. The drone of engines filled every corner of her skull. She closed her eyes, but images replayed against the dark. The boy with the toy, her brother with the fishing rod, a school hallway splattered with blood. By the time they landed, dawn was breaking. Pale light stretched across the horizon, painting the base in shades of gray. Soldiers bustled, vehicles rumbled, the day beginning like any other. For everyone else, maybe. For her, the day had ended hours ago. She stepped off the ramp and saw him waiting. The colonel, his uniform crisp, his jaw tight, his eyes like knives. Walk with me, he said, not a request. She followed, boots crunching against gravel. They moved past rows of tents, past stacks of crates, until they reached the edge of the base where the noise faded. He stopped, turned, and stared at her. What the hell was that? Her silence held. You disobeyed a direct order, he snapped. Do you understand the gravity of that? Do you understand what's at stake here? Her eyes didn't waver. He stepped closer, voice low, dangerous. Do you think you know better than command? Do you think your judgment outweighs ours? She spoke finally, quiet, barely above a whisper. I know what I saw. The colonel's nostrils flared. You saw weakness, and you let it control you. Her jaw clenched. Weakness, that word again. It had haunted her since the last mission. They didn't call it grief. They didn't call it humanity, they called it weakness. "I saw a child," she said. The colonel leaned in, eyes burning. "Collateral." Her stomach twisted. That word, clinical, empty, a word that stripped life of meaning. He turned away, packing. "Do you know how many lives your hesitation might cost? Do you have any idea what happens if that man continues breathing? Every day he lives, more children die. Think about that." She didn't flinch, but inside his words carved deep. When he faced her again, his voice was colder. "You're off the mission, effective immediately." It wasn't a surprise. She had expected it, but hearing it still landed like a blow. Ramirez tried to intervene later, she knew. He always did. But rules were rules, and silence couldn't defend her. That night, she sat alone in her quarters. The hum of generators filled the air. She stared at her rifle resting against the wall. A weapon that once felt like an extension of her body now looked like something foreign. Something that belonged to a past self she wasn't sure existed anymore. Her hands trembled, not from fear but from the ache of questions. Had she done the right thing, or had she doomed more children by sparing one? Her silence gave her no answers. But somewhere in the distance, faint and hollow, she thought she heard cannons thunder, and for a moment in her mind, even they seemed to pause. Listening, as if her silence had something to say. Something unspoken. Something defiant. What happens to a soldier when silence is louder than orders? She felt the weight of that question pressing on her chest as she walked the narrow corridors of the base, boots dragging against concrete, uniform heavy with dust. The colonel's words still echoed. "You're off the mission. Final. Cold." But she didn't feel finished. The walls smelled of stale coffee and sweat. Radios crackled behind closed doors. Somewhere outside, laughter broke through, soldiers joking, killing time, filling the void with noise. She envied them. Noise meant forgetting. Noise meant survival. She had only silence, and silence never let her forget. Her quarters were bare, stripped of personality. A cot, a metal locker, a folded uniform that smelled faintly of detergent and dust. She sat on the cot, leaning forward, elbows on knees, her hands pressed against her face. For a moment, just a moment, she let herself break. The image replayed again and again. The child, the toy dragging along concrete, the target standing only steps away. A shot that could have changed everything, undone everything, depending on which side of command you stood. Her silence had spoken, and now she would pay for it. The door creaked. She lowered her hands slowly. Ramirez leaned against the frame, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. He didn't step inside. He knew boundaries, knew she wasn't the kind that welcomed company. "They'll reassign you," he said finally. "Paperwork, desk duty, maybe a training post if you're lucky." She didn't answer. He shifted, studying her. "They think you froze, they think you're broken." Her jaw clenched. Broken, another word they loved. "But I don't," he added softly. She looked up at him, eyes tired, rimmed with sleeplessness. For the first time in days, maybe weeks, her silence cracked. "Then what do you think?" He hesitated, then shrugged. "I think you saw something they didn't want to see." That was Ramirez, always cutting to the truth even if it stung. He finally stepped inside, setting his pack down with a dull thud. "Listen, they'll spin this. You know they will. The colonel will write his report, command will read it, and you'll be stamped as unstable, unfit for field duty." She turned her gaze to the wall. "But," his voice lowered, "I also know they're not telling you everything." That made her pause. Her eyes flicked back to him. Ramirez sat on the cot opposite hers, leaning forward. "That compound, the man inside, he's not just another name. I've been piecing things together. Intel we weren't supposed to see. He's tied deeper than they admit." Her chest tightened. She remembered the flicker she had seen on the satellite feed. The shadow in the corner no one acknowledged. "What are you saying?" she whispered. He hesitated, then slid a folded piece of paper across the cot. She stared at it, the creases sharp, the edges worn. "Coordinates," he said. "Secondary site, not on the maps. Command buried it. I don't know why." Her hand hovered over the paper. She didn't touch it. Not yet. "Why tell me?" Ramirez's eyes softened. "Because you're the only one stubborn enough to ask the questions they don't want asked. And because," he trailed off, shaking his head, "because I owe you." Her silence deepened. She didn't want to talk about debts, about the mission years ago where her decision had saved his life but ended another's. He carried that weight as much as she did, even if he never admitted it. Finally, she unfolded the paper. The numbers blurred for a moment, her hands trembling just slightly. A hidden sight. Another piece of a puzzle she hadn't even known existed. Her throat tightened. "If I go there." "You won't be going as part of the mission," Ramirez cut in. "You'll be going against orders." The words hung between them like smoke. For a soldier, orders were oxygen. Defy them and you suffocated. But her silence had already cut her off from the air they gave. She was already suffocating. "What's at that site?" she asked. Ramirez's jaw tightened. "Civilians, maybe hostages, maybe something worse. All I know is command doesn't want it touched." Her pulse quickened. She thought of the child in the compound, thought of her brother, thought of all the lives written off as acceptable risk. "Why me?" she asked again, quieter. "Because you won't look away," he said simply. She folded the paper again, sliding it into her pocket. The weight of it pressed against her like a brand. That night she couldn't sleep. The base hummed with life, generators growling, trucks rumbling, radios spitting static. She lay on her cot staring at the ceiling, counting the seconds between her breaths. When dawn broke, she made her decision. No ceremony, no announcement, just a quiet resolve as she laced her boots, strapped on her vest, and shouldered her rifle. She slipped through the base unnoticed, one shadow among many. But Ramirez noticed. He was waiting near the gate, gear slung over his shoulder. "You thought I'd let you go alone?" he asked. She shook her head faintly, a ghost of a smile tugging at her lips. They left the base under cover of supply transport, blending into the noise of engines and dust. Once beyond the perimeter, they slipped into silence, traveling by foot, the desert stretching endless around them. Hours passed. Heat rose off the ground in shimmering waves. Sweat slicked their backs. Flies buzzed. Every step felt heavier with the weight of what they were doing, not just defying orders, but carving their own path through a war that didn't forgive disobedience. Finally, as the sun dipped low, they reached the ridge. Ramirez raised his binoculars, scanning the horizon. "There," he murmured. She followed his gaze. The site was smaller than the compound but more fortified. Makeshift walls of corrugated metal, guard towers stitched together with scrap, lights strung across poles. It looked abandoned at first glance. But then, movement, figures slipping through the shadows, the faint echo of voices carried by the wind. Her chest tightened. She adjusted her scope, focusing, and then she saw them. Civilians, women, children, herded into a corner like livestock. Her stomach turned. This was it, the peace command had buried, the truth they didn't want touched. Her silence stretched, heavy with rage and sorrow. She whispered almost to herself, "They knew." Ramirez lowered his binoculars slowly, his jaw clenched. "Yeah, they knew." The question burned in her throat. Why? Why would command bury this? Why would they send them after one man while ignoring dozens of innocent lives caged like animals? She didn't ask it out loud. She didn't need to. The answer would come eventually, but not tonight. Tonight was about choice. Do nothing, and those civilians remained ghosts in the dark. Move now, and they risked everything. Her silence cracked just slightly. "We go in." Ramirez gave a short nod, no hesitation. "Then we go in quiet." They crawled through the dust, bodies low, every movement deliberate. The smell of rust and sweat grew stronger as they neared the perimeter. A guard lit a cigarette, its ember glowing in the dark. She froze, heart hammering. The smoke curled into the air, thin and fragile. For a moment she wondered, did the man know? Did he know he was guarding cages filled with lives? Did he care? Her finger curled against the trigger. She could end him now silently. But then another thought pierced through. If she fired, the silence would break. And once broken, there was no going back. She glanced at Ramirez. His eyes met hers, waiting. Her silence stretched. Then a choice. What happens to silence when the first shot is fired? She lay flat against the dirt, scope pressed to her eye, the guard's cigarette glowing like a beacon in the dark. Her breath slowed, heart steady, the world shrinking into one circle of glass and shadow. A single squeeze and the silence would shatter. But she didn't move. Her finger hovered, curled but unpressed. The man leaned lazily against the corrugated wall, smoke curling upward, his rifle slung carelessly. He didn't know she was there. Didn't know his life balanced on the weight of her hesitation. Ramirez whispered beside her, "What's it going to be?" She didn't answer. Not because she didn't know, but because words carried weight, and once spoken, like bullets, they couldn't be taken back. She lowered her rifle slowly. Ramirez exhaled, a soft hiss of disbelief. "You're really not going to take him?" Her eyes stayed on the sight. "Not yet." They waited, shadows moving across the compound like ghosts. Guards patrolled lazily, laughing, their voices carrying faintly through the night. Beyond them, behind the patchwork walls, she could see the shapes of civilians huddled together. Small movements, faces pressed close, eyes reflecting faint light, fear made visible. Her silence deepened. She thought of her brother, of his face in the casket, the silence of the funeral broken only by the sound of earth falling on wood. She had vowed then no more children lost, not if she could stop it. But stopping it meant more than one shot. It meant going in. "Shift left," she whispered finally. Ramirez didn't argue. He followed, their bodies sliding low through dust and shadow. They reached the perimeter where the wall sagged, rusted edges curling like paper. She pressed against it, listening. Voices murmured on the other side. A laugh, the clink of a bottle. She glanced at Ramirez. His hand hovered near his knife. She nodded once. They slipped through the gap soundless. Inside, the smell hit first. Sweat, metal, the sour tang of unwashed bodies. The civilians were crammed into a corner, thin wire fencing holding them like animals. A child coughed, the sound sharp, desperate. She froze. Not from fear, from recognition. One of the children, a boy no older than 10, clutched a toy in his hand. A small wooden figure, chipped and worn. Her chest tightened. It was the same child, the one she had spared hours ago at the compound. He was here. Her silence cracked. They moved deeper, shadows merging with shadows. Ramirez neutralized one guard silently, knife slipping quick across flesh. The body sagged, lowered without sound. She felt the weight of it anyway. Every kill added to the silence inside her, a ledger written in blood. They reached the fence. Dozens of eyes stared back, hollow, fearful. One woman stepped forward, lips trembling. No words, just a gesture, hands pressed together, pleading. Her throat ached. She crouched, fingers brushing the wire. Rust flaked against her skin. She whispered, barely audible, "We're getting you out." The woman's eyes filled with tears. She nodded, clutching the child closer. But then a shout. A guard had seen them. The silence shattered. Gunfire erupted, sharp and deafening. Muzzle flashes lit the dark like lightning. Bullets ripped against metal. Screams rose from the civilians, high and raw. She dropped, rifle snapping to her shoulder, sights aligning in a heartbeat. One shot, then another. Guards fell, bodies twisting. Ramirez fired beside her, his shots precise, controlled. Chaos spread like fire. The civilians screamed, pressing against the fence. The boy clutched his toy tighter, eyes wide with terror. She pushed forward, grabbing the wire with both hands. Ramirez, cover. He laid down fire, his weapon spitting fury into the night. She pulled her knife, sawing at the fence, metal screeching. Her hands bled, skin tearing, but she didn't stop. A hole opened, small enough for one. She grabbed the boy, shoved him through. Run. He froze, staring at her. Her voice broke sharp. Go. He scrambled out, legs pumping, vanishing into the dark. Others followed, clawing through the gap, desperate for air, for freedom, for hope. Bullets ripped the ground around them. Ramirez cursed, ducking low, his rifle clattering empty. He reloaded fast, sweat dripping down his face. She turned, sights locking on another guard. Shot. Down. Another. Down. Her body moved on instinct, every motion drilled by years of silence and repetition. But her mind burned with one thought: get them out. The fence tore wider. Dozens poured through, stumbling into the night. A woman screamed as a bullet tore past, grazing her arm. The child she carried wailed, high and shrill. She grabbed them, pulling them low, shielding them with her body. Keep moving. The firefight raged. Smoke, dust, the metallic tang of blood. Her ears rang, every sound muffled by the pounding of her own heartbeat. And then silence. Not peace. The kind of silence that follows death. She turned. Ramirez lay on the ground, blood pooling beneath him, a dark stain spreading fast. Her chest constricted. No. She dropped to her knees, hands pressing against the wound. His eyes flickered, glassy but aware. Do, he whispered, blood bubbling at his lips. Don't stop. Tears blurred her vision. Her silence cracked, broken by a raw whisper. Stay with me, please. He coughed, a faint smile tugging at his lips, still stubborn as hell. She pressed harder, hands shaking. Civilians rushed past, their footsteps pounding the dirt. The boy with the toy stopped, staring at Ramirez, eyes wide with fear. Go, she screamed at him. He ran. Ramirez's breath hitched. You did the right thing, don't doubt it. Her tears fell, hot against his skin. And then his chest stilled. The silence swallowed him whole. Her body shook, grief ripping through her. But there was no time. The compound still swarmed, guards shouting, boots pounding. She grabbed her rifle, teeth clenched, rage burning hot. Her silence wasn't passive anymore. It was fury. She rose, firing shot after shot, her body a machine, her mind a storm. Every guard that fell, every scream that cut the air, she felt Ramirez beside her. Felt his hand steadying hers like it had on so many nights before. When it was over, the ground was littered with bodies. Smoke hung heavy, acrid. The civilians were gone, swallowed by the dark, free. She stood alone in the ruin, rifle heavy, chest heaving. Ramirez lay still, eyes open but unseeing. Her silence screamed. She knelt beside him, closing his eyes with trembling fingers. A single tear slipped down her cheek, carving through dust and blood. Then she whispered, soft as prayer, I won't let them bury this. Her voice broke the silence, just for a moment. But the silence swallowed it again. And in that silence she made a vow. The truth would not stay hidden, not this time. Even if it meant her life. What do you say to command, when the cost of silence is measured in blood? The helicopter's blades roared overhead, a storm of dust and grit tearing across the compound's ruin. She stood motionless, boots heavy, rifle slung across her back. The civilians had vanished into the hills, swallowed by the night, their freedom earned with fire and loss. Ramirez, though, he wasn't moving. She hadn't wanted to leave him. Her hands had clenched his vest, knuckles white, refusing to let go. But the extraction team had pulled her back, dragging her toward the chopper's open bay. Her voice had cut the air like a blade. Don't you dare touch him. But the soldier gripping her wrist only shook his head. We can't carry both. She fought them, fury sparking wild, until the sight of Ramirez's face stilled her. peaceful now, silent, his eyes closed because she had closed them. She let go. The helicopter lifted, carrying her away. The compound shrank, flames licking at the night. Ramirez lay somewhere in that chaos, swallowed by the silence she could not fight. The others stared at her on the flight back, some with pity, some with accusation. No one spoke. The silence inside the bird was heavier than the rotors. When they landed, floodlights washed everything sterile. She stepped onto the tarmac, the air sharp, cold, smelling faintly of jet fuel. Her boots left prints on the concrete that she couldn't bring herself to look at. A colonel was waiting, arms folded, jaw set. He didn't ask how many civilians were saved. He didn't ask about Ramirez. He asked one thing. Why did you break comms? Her silence returned, thicker now. She didn't answer. He stepped closer, eyes like stone. You had orders, secure intelligence, not start a firefight. Her chest tightened. There were civilians in cages. That wasn't your mission. Her voice sharpened, rising despite her control. They were children. His silence was colder than hers. Debrief in 10, he said finally, turning his back. She stood there, fists trembling. The others filed past, some casting her a glance, most keeping their eyes forward. None of them carried Ramirez's blood on their hands. She did. The debrief room was sterile, white walls, metal table, the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. She sat alone, back straight, hands folded in her lap. The colonel paced slowly, a file in his hand. 2 guards neutralized, he began, voice clipped. 3 civilians confirmed dead, 18 escaped. 1 friendly casualty, Sergeant Ramirez. He paused, eyes flicking to her. Cause of death, insubordination. Her head snapped up. What did you just say? He didn't blink. Your deviation from orders compromised the mission. Ramirez paid the price. Her breath caught, fury burning through her grief. Don't you dare put that on him. He dropped the file on the table, pages scattering. Photos, maps, a single image of Ramirez, his face grainy, alive, unaware of what fate waited. History won't remember names, the colonel said, voice even. Just numbers, keep yours clean. She rose slowly. Her hands shook not from fear but from the war inside her. Her silence wanted to scream, wanted to break glass, flip the table, tear the walls down. But she didn't. She leaned forward, her voice low, deliberate. Ramirez isn't a number, and neither am I. The colonel didn't respond. His silence was the silence of walls, immovable, deaf. She walked out. The corridors felt endless, her boots echoing hollow. Each step was heavy with ghosts. Ramirez's voice lingered in her head. You did the right thing. Don't doubt it. But doubt ate at her anyway. Had she condemned him? If she'd pulled the trigger earlier, ended the guard without hesitation, would they have slipped away clean? Or would it have all burned anyway? She reached the barracks, the door creaking as she pushed it open. Empty, quiet. Her cot weighted, thin blanket folded sharp, boots lined perfectly beside. She sat, elbows on her knees, face buried in her hands. Her silence broke in private. Her shoulders shook, tears spilling through her fingers. She bit down on the sound, forcing it back, but grief leaked anyway. She had held men as they died before. She had buried comrades, saluted coffins, whispered names in the dark. But Ramirez was different. He had been her anchor, her balance, the one who reminded her she was still human when the mission stripped that away, and now he was gone. She lay back, staring at the ceiling. The fan turned slowly, its blades creaking. Each rotation sounded like a clock, ticking away the silence. Her eyes drifted shut, exhaustion pulling at her. And in the dream that followed, Ramirez stood at the edge of a field, rifle slung, smiling faintly. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. But when she reached for him, he stepped back, fatting into the horizon. She woke with a gasp, the barracks still dark, sweat cold on her skin. Her hands trembled. Her silence pressed heavy, choking. She sat up, reaching for her pack. Her fingers brushed something inside Ramirez's patch, torn from his vest when she had tried to stop the bleeding. She held it, rough fabric scratching her palm, her throat tightening. A voice came soft from the doorway. "You're not the only one who misses him." She turned. A young private stood there, barely 20, eyes red-rimmed. He stepped in, hesitant. "Ramirez, he used to tell stories about you." She frowned. "Stories?" The boy nodded. "Said you carried silence like armor, said it wasn't weakness, said it was strength." Her breath caught. She looked down at the patch, tears threatening again. The boy's voice wavered. "He looked up to you." She wanted to answer, to thank him, to tell him Ramirez had been the reason she hadn't lost herself years ago, but the words wouldn't come. Her silence spoke for her. The boy nodded once, as if he understood, and left. She sat there, staring at the patch until dawn. When morning came, orders arrived. She was reassigned. Not to rest, not to grieve, but to finish what Ramirez had started. The colonel's voice had been cold when he delivered the message. "Intel recovered from the site suggests a supply chain. Weapons, routes, you'll track it." Her chest ached. They wanted her silence to swallow Ramirez's death, to bury it under the next mission, the next order, the next war. But she made her decision as the sun rose, its light spilling across the barracks floor. She wouldn't bury him. She would carry him. Every step, every silence, until the truth could no longer be ignored. She strapped her pack, tucked the patch into her vest, and walked out. Her boots struck the earth with new weight, not just her own. Ramirez walked with her now. The silence followed, heavy, relentless. But this time it wasn't empty. It was a vow. What if the mission you were sent on wasn't meant to succeed? The convoy rattled along a broken road, dust curling in the air, engines growling against the silence of the desert. She sat in the back, helmet strapped, rifle across her lap. Her eyes never left the horizon. Not the mountains, not the jagged line of distant structures. Her silence lingered. Ramirez's patch pressed against her chest beneath the vest, a weight, a reminder. She had been ordered to track the supply chain, weapons moving across borders, routes disguised as aid convoys, traders, humanitarian runs. On paper it looked straightforward. Follow, observe, report. But missions never looked the same on the ground. The sergeant riding across from her shifted uneasily, his knee bouncing. He was older, face carved with years of dust and strain. Finally, he spoke. "You think they'll tell us what this is really about?" She looked up slowly. "They haven't so far." His jaw tightened. He gave a short laugh, humorless. "Figures." The others in the vehicle stayed quiet, young, nervous, their rifles too clean, their eyes too wide. She knew the look, soldiers who hadn't bled yet. The convoy slowed, engines growling lower. A checkpoint loomed ahead, nothing official, scrap metal welded into a gate, armed men standing too casually, eyes too sharp. She stiffened. "Stay loose," the sergeant muttered. "We're just shadows today." But she knew shadows. She lived in them, and something in the silence ahead felt wrong. The gate lifted after a brief exchange. The convoy rolled on. The armed men didn't move to search, didn't even pretend to care. Her gut twisted. They drove deeper into a valley, cliffs rising on either side. She scanned the rock faces, scope sweeping. Shadows shifted there too, but not theirs. "Ambush." "Stop the convoy," she hissed. The sergeant frowned. "What?" "Stop now." But before he could signal, the first explosion ripped the ground ahead. The lead truck vanished in a fireball, dirt and metal raining down. Shouts, gunfire. The world erupted in chaos. She hit the dirt, rolling to cover, weapons snapping up. Shadows on the cliffs became figures, rifles flashing. Bullets cracked the air, snapping against metal, tearing into flesh. The young soldier beside her screamed, clutching his leg, blood spilling. Her silence hardened. She pressed low, firing quick, precise. One figure dropped, another, but there were too many. The sergeant crawled beside her, face pale. This was a setup. She didn't answer, didn't need to. The question was why. She grabbed the wounded soldier, dragging him behind cover. His eyes were wide, breath ragged. "Don't let me die here," he begged, voice breaking. Her silence shook. She pressed his wound, forcing her voice steady. "You won't." But she wasn't sure. The firefight dragged, endless. Her ears rang, the valley echoing with screams, with fire, with silence broken over and over. And then sudden stillness. The gunfire ceased, dust hung heavy, the cliffs emptied, attackers vanishing like ghosts. Survivors staggered up, coughing, bleeding, rifles trembling in their hands. Of 4 vehicles, only 2 remained. Of 15 soldiers, barely 8 stood. The sergeant cursed, throwing his helmet. "They knew we were coming." Her silence deepened. She touched Ramirez's patch beneath her vest. Of course they knew. At base, the colonel's voice was as flat as stone. "Losses happen." She stood in the debrief, blood on her hands from the boy she had tried to save. He hadn't made it. His dog tags were still warm in her pocket. Her voice cut sharp. That wasn't bad luck, that was betrayal. The colonel didn't flinch. "Watch your tone, Lieutenant." Her silence screamed inside. But she said nothing more. Later, in the dark of the barracks, the sergeant found her. He leaned against the wall, lighting a cigarette with shaking hands. "They sent us there to burn," he said. She met his eyes. He wasn't asking, he was stating. "They'll bury it in paperwork," he added bitterly. "Say the intel was bad, call the dead casualties of chance, and we'll be next if we open our mouths." Her silence lingered. She looked down at Ramirez's patch, fingers brushing it. The sergeant watched, then exhaled smoke. "You planning to stay quiet too?" Her jaw clenched. "Silence doesn't mean surrender." He studied her, then nodded slowly. "Then maybe you're the one who has to carry it." That night she couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, mind running through every detail, every shadow. Someone in command had pulled strings. Someone had fed their route to the enemy. And someone wanted her to stay silent. Her silence wasn't compliance anymore. It was a weapon. The next morning she found a note slipped under her door. No name, just words scrawled in a hurried hand. "Not all enemies are outside the wire. Trust no one." Her pulse quickened. She folded the note carefully, sliding it into her pocket. The walls around her seemed narrower now. Every face carried weight. Every silence in the halls wasn't absence of sound, it was presence of threat. She walked to the mess hall, boots clicking. The soldiers' chatter died when she entered. Whispers followed, eyes flicked away. She sat alone, tray untouched. Ramirez's voice echoed in her memory. "You did the right thing, don't doubt it." But doubt was everywhere. She thought of the civilians freed, the boy with the toy. His face haunted her, a flicker of hope in the storm. Did he make it? Was he alive? Or had the silence swallowed him too? Her fork clattered against the tray. She rose, leaving food untouched. In the corridor, the colonel's aide intercepted her. "Command wants you in ops." Ops, another mission. Another silence dressed as orders. She followed. The room hummed with screens, maps glowing red and blue. Routes traced like veins across the desert. At the center, the colonel stood, arms folded. "You'll lead the next recon," he said flatly. "Alone." Her silence cracked. "Alone." He nodded. "We need someone who won't ask questions." Her jaw tightened. She asked anyway, "And what happens if I find the truth?" His eyes didn't move. "Then you'll do what soldiers do, stay silent." The words cut deep, cold, absolute. She met his stare, her silence pressing hard against her throat. She wanted to spit fury, to tell him she wouldn't play his game, to drag the truth into the light. But she said nothing. Not yet. Her silence was her cover. She accepted the file, tucking it under her arm. She turned, boots striking the floor. Her heart pounded, not with fear but with clarity. Ramirez hadn't died for silence. She wouldn't live for it either. She stepped into the night air, cool against her skin. The stars stretched above, cold, endless. She breathed deep, the weight of the file heavy in her hand, the patch heavier against her chest. Her silence carried more now. Secrets, betrayal, vows. And when it finally broke, the cannons wouldn't roar. They would pause. And they would listen. How far can silence stretch before it becomes betrayal of yourself? The file sat heavy in her hands as she closed the door to her quarters. A slim folder, pages too clean, too thin, roots marked in red, supply drops circled, but something about it felt rehearsed, like a script written for her eyes. She laid it open on the desk. The maps didn't match what she had seen in the valley. The markers were deliberate and wrong. Her fingers brushed the corner, a faint smudge. Ink dragged in a way that didn't belong to printers, hand-altered. She sat back, her silence tightening. Someone wanted her to follow a path, not to discover, to disappear. The fan above word, blades cutting the air in slow rhythm. She stared at the ceiling, Ramirez's voice rising in her mind. Don't doubt it. She couldn't, not now. A knock jolted her. She snapped the folder shut. The door creaked open. The sergeant, the same one who'd cursed the ambush, leaned in. His face was drawn, eyes ringed with fatigue. "You busy?" She didn't answer, just looked at him. He stepped inside, closing the door. "Words out, they're sending you solo." Her jaw tightened. "You heard right." He studied her for a long beat. Then he pulled something from his pocket, a small recorder. He set it on the desk between them. "I shouldn't have this," he said quietly. "But Ramirez, he gave it to me once, said if things ever smelled wrong, use it." Her throat clenched. She reached for the recorder, fingers brushing the worn edges. The sergeant leaned closer. "Play it when you're alone." And just like that, he left. She stared at the small device, her pulse hammering. Then she pressed play. Static, then a voice. "Ramirez. If you're hearing this, it means I was right. Something's off. Too many missions that don't add up. Intel too clean, too fast, like they want us where we shouldn't be." Her chest tightened. He continued, voice steady. "I don't know how deep it runs, but I know this. It's not the enemy outside the wire that'll break us. It's the one giving orders inside. Watch your six. Don't trust silence when it comes from them." Static swallowed the rest. Her hands trembled as she set it down. Ramirez had known. He hadn't said it out loud, not to her. He'd carried it like she carried her silence. And now it was hers alone. The next morning she moved with routine precision. She loaded her pack, strapped her rifle, slid Ramirez's patch into her vest. But inside, her silence churned. The colonel briefed her coldly. "Route north, grid 7, confirm activity, report only to me." She nodded once, said nothing. But the file in her pack wasn't the only thing she carried. She slipped the recorder in too. The convoy that dropped her off vanished quickly, dust trailing into the horizon. She stood alone in the barren stretch, mountains jagged against the sky. Silence pressed heavy, broken only by the wind. She began to walk. Hours passed, sand crunching under boots, sun bearing down, sweat tracing lines through dust. Then movement ahead. Through her scope she saw the sight, not an arms cache, not weapons. Tents, trucks, civilians unloading crates stamped with foreign insignia, aid supplies, medicine. Her silence grew sharp. They weren't smuggling weapons, they were smuggling hope. And command had sent her here to call it an enemy operation, to justify fire, to bury the truth under reports. Her throat ached. She lowered the scope slowly. What was worse, pulling the trigger or writing the lie? Her silence refused both. She circled the ridge, keeping low. Each step was deliberate, careful. She snapped photos, crates, markings, faces, proof. But proof was dangerous. As the sun dipped low, engines growled behind her. She froze, dropping flat. Black SUVs rolled in, dust curling around them. Doors opened. Men stepped out, not soldiers, contractors, faces hidden behind shades, rifles too polished. One of them spoke into a radio, words carried faintly. "She's here." Her chest constricted. They weren't after the aid camp. They were after her. She slipped back, crawling into the rocks. Her breath slowed, heartbeat pounding in her ears. The men fanned out, methodical, trained. Her silence became survival. She moved with the rhythm of shadows, inch by inch, slow, careful, every rock a shield, every pause a prayer. But one wrong step cracked. Stone shifted under her boot. A shout there. Gunfire erupted. Bullets chewed stone, sparks spitting. She rolled, rifle snapping up, returning fire. One man dropped, another stumbled. The canyon echoed with thunder. Dust rose, the air burned. She sprinted low, weaving between boulders, lungs searing. Ramirez's voice echoed, "Don't doubt it." She didn't. She reached a ridge, dropped prone, scope rising. One shot, another. The contractors faltered, regrouped, but they kept coming. She pulled a grenade from her vest, yanked the pin, and hurled it. The blast shook the air, dirt showering down. Screams cut sharp. She used the chaos to slip back, deeper into the ridge, vanishing into shadow. Her silence held. When night fell, she crouched in the dark, chest heaving, the recorder in her hand. Ramirez's words played again, faint against the crickets. It's the one giving orders inside. She stared at the stars, cold, distant, silent. The betrayal was no longer suspicion. It was truth. She wasn't on a mission. She was a target. And the silence she carried was no longer safe. It was a weapon. A weapon they feared. She tucked the recorder close, breath steadying. Her choice was clear now. She wouldn't give them her silence. She would turn it against them. For Ramirez, for the civilians, for herself. The cannons hadn't roared yet. But when they did, they would listen. The night stretched endless, broken only by the whisper of wind across stone. She sat in the hollow of the ridge, back pressed to cold rock, rifle laid across her knees. The recorder rested in her palm, Ramirez's voice still lingering like smoke. It's not the enemy outside the wire. Her silence wasn't protection anymore. It was proof. And proof was dangerous. Dawn bled into the horizon, painting the desert in muted red. She knew they would come again. Not rebels, not insurgents, her own shadows, men with clean rifles and dirty orders. She closed her eyes, breathing steady. She thought of Ramirez, of his laughter by the fire, his hand steady on her shoulder when doubt had clawed her. He had seen it, the rot, the lies. He had chosen silence to protect them. But silence had killed him. She wouldn't repeat it. She checked her rifle, clean, oiled, full mag. She slid the recorder into her vest, close to her heart, a reminder, a promise. Then she began to move. The valley stretched wide, the aid camp still alive with morning activity. Children carried water cans, women stacked crates of medicine, men checked trucks. None of them knew the crosshairs above their heads. None of them knew the storm gathering. But she did. From the ridge she scanned the horizon, dust plumes, engines. The black SUVs returned, more this time, a convoy heavily armed. They weren't here to destroy the camp. They were here to erase her. She exhaled slowly, adjusting her scope. Not yet. She had to choose her moment. The SUVs halted. Contractors spilled out, tactical precision in every step. They moved like predators, confident, methodical. The leader raised a hand. "Fan out, she's close." Her pulse slowed. She tracked him through the glass. One squeeze and he'd drop. But that wasn't enough. A bullet was silence. She needed her silence to speak. She reached for the radio clipped to her vest. Static hissed when she turned the dial. Her throat tightened. She had to break her silence the right way, not with panic, with precision. She pressed transmit. This is, she hesitated. Her voice felt foreign, jagged. Echo 3, Grid 7, hostiles on site. They're not insurgents, they're ours. Static, no reply. She repeated it firmer this time. Echo 3, friendly forces are compromised. Aid camp under threat. Request immediate oversight. The words hung heavy. Then a crackle. Say again, Echo 3. Her chest tightened. They'd heard, at least someone had. She ducked lower, adjusting position. Through her scope, she saw the leader's head snap toward his radio. His men stiffened. They'd heard too. Now they knew. She broken her silence. Gunfire erupted. Bullets shredded the rocks around her. Dust exploded, shards slicing her cheek. She rolled, returning fire. 1, 2, 3 shots, clean, precise. The contractors advanced, relentless. She shifted, crawled, fired again. The valley echoed with thunder, the aid workers scattering, screams rising. Her lungs burned, her hands bled, but her focus never broke. This wasn't about survival, it was about being heard. She fired until her rifle clicked empty. Then she drew her sidearm, squeezing off shots as she retreated deeper into the ridge. A voice boomed from below, the leader. Stand down, soldier. No one will believe you, you're already erased. Her silence hardened. She shouted back, the words ripping raw from her throat. Then you'll have to bury the truth with me. The gunfire resumed, fierce and unrelenting. She ducked behind a boulder, fumbling another mag into her rifle. Her hands shook, sweat stinging her eyes. She pressed the recorder once more, Ramirez's static-laced voice playing faintly. Don't trust silence when it comes from them. Her silence wasn't theirs anymore. It was his, it was hers. It was a weapon. And she would fire it. She surged from cover, rifle raised, her shots cutting through the canyon. The contractors faltered, pinned. The leader shouted orders, but his men hesitated. Some glanced toward the camp, toward the civilians they'd been told were enemies. Doubt cracked their precision. She pressed her radio again, shouting through the storm. Echo 3 to command. You hear me now? This is the truth. Mark your maps, civilians at Grid 7. Aid, not arms, proof on site. Static. Then a new voice, calm authority. Copy Echo 3. We're seeing your feed stay alive. Reinforcements inbound. Relief surged sharp in her chest. They'd seen, they knew. The leader roared furious, cut her down now. But it was too late. The whir of rotors thundered overhead. Helicopters swept in, shadows blotting the sun. Soldiers fast-roped down, forming lines between the camp and the contractors. The leader's face twisted. He raised his weapon, but her shot cut him down before he could fire. Silence rang out. Not the silence of fear. The silence after truth breaks chains. The contractors dropped rifles, hands raised. The civilians clutched one another, eyes wide with disbelief. And she finally exhaled. Her silence had spoken. Hours later, she sat on the tailgate of a Humvee, dirt streaked across her face, uniform torn. A medic wrapped her arm, but her eyes were fixed on the recorder in her hand. Ramirez's voice would never fade, but now his silence wasn't alone. She had carried it, transformed it, made it echo loud enough to shake walls. The colonel approached, flanked by brass. His face was pale, stiff. He opened his mouth, but she cut him off, not with words. With silence. A silence that accused, that condemned, that proved she no longer belonged to their lies. He looked away first. Later, as the convoy rolled out, she sat in the open air, wind cutting across her face. The desert stretched endless, but she felt lighter, not unscarred, never unscarred. But free. Because silence had power. not when it obeyed, when it defied, when it stood in place of a shout, when it carried the dead forward. She closed her eyes, Ramirez's voice blending with her own heartbeat. And in that silence, she spoke the only words she needed, not aloud, but carved deep into the marrow of her being. Some silences bury truth. Others carry it. And the strongest are the ones that refuse to be broken until the world is ready to listen. Her story ended there, but her silence did not.